Imagine this, the inland sea of Japan, dead of night. The water is a sheet of black glass. Suddenly, a colossal shadow erupts from the darkness, its bow carving a silver gash in the water. This is a rebuilt Japanese battleship, pushing past 30 knots under the ghostly glow of blackout lamps. Down in the engine rooms, it's a symphony of controlled chaos. Engineers, their faces streaked with oil and sweat, watch gauges quiver, their hands flying across clipboards, scribbling down horsepower, shaft RPMs, and fuel consumption. On the bridge, a young naval architect, eyes glued to the churning wake, whispers a single obsessed word: faster. The title, Fastest Battleship Ever, is a crown heavy with myth and national pride. But let's get the facts straight right away. The absolute undisputed speed record for a true battleship belongs to America's magnificent Iowa class, which could thunder along at an incredible 33 knots. But the story we're telling today is about a different kind of achievement. It's about how Japanese engineers, despite being handcuffed by naval treaties, hobbled by industrial limitations and operating under a suffocating cloak of secrecy, managed to build some of the fastest capital ships of the era. The modernized Kongō-class battleships were capable of slicing through the waves at just over 30 knots. Why did this matter so much? Because in naval warfare, speed is freedom. Speed dictates who can initiate a battle and who can escape one. Speed decides which ships can race alongside the new queens of the sea, the aircraft carriers. For Japan's WWII, the world's most powerful carrier strike force, having escorts that could keep up wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity. This is a story of human ingenuity and institutional ambition. It's the story of the Imperial Japanese Navy Technical Department, a secretive group of brilliant minds, many of whom were disciples of the legendary naval architect Yuzuru Hiraga. It's the story of the bustling shipyards at Kure and Sasebo, where thousands of workers turned complex blueprints into towering realities of steel and steam. They were the unsung heroes who brought these metal leviathans to life. Our story begins not in Japan, but in Britain. In 1913, a brand new state-of-the-art battlecruiser named Kongō is delivered from the Vickers shipyard. She is a masterpiece of British design, fast, elegant, and powerfully armed. For Japan, she was both a template and a challenge. A benchmark to be studied, replicated, and ultimately surpassed. While Kongō herself was British-built, her three sister ships, Haruna, Haie, and Kirishima, were constructed in Japanese yards. And it was these sisters that would undergo a radical transformation. Through the 1920s and 30s, as the world lurched towards another global conflict, Japanese designers and engineers began a massive top-secret reconstruction program. They would take these aging battlecruisers, originally designed for a different era of naval combat, and painstakingly rebuild them. They ripped out old boilers, installed powerful new turbines, streamlined their hulls, and piled on armor. Their goal was audacious: to create a new breed of warship, a fast battleship, capable of fulfilling the dual roles of fleet engagement and carrier escort. So picture yourself back on that bridge during the midnight trial. The ship trembles as the engine order telegraph clangs down to full ahead. Deep in the vessel's heart, the turbines whine to a piercing scream. The wake astern explodes into a brilliant white fury, stretching for miles into the darkness. The stopwatch is clicking. How did they do it? How did Japanese engineers take a hull designed in the 1910s and force it to sprint into the high-speed, high-stakes world of World War II naval combat? The answer lies in a fascinating blend of brilliant engineering, clever workarounds, and a relentless, almost fanatical pursuit of speed. Step inside the naval arsenal. The air is thick with the metallic tang of ozone from welding arcs and the damp chill of the model basin. This isn't just about blueprints anymore. It's about feel, about the brute force of water and steel. Here, in the testing tanks, you see the scars of progress. Miniature propellers, spun to their limits, show the pockmarks of cavitation, tiny, violent implosions of water vapor that can shred a real propeller in months. Engineers watch intently as streams of dye, like smoke in a wind tunnel, curl along the hull of a newly refined model. They're chasing every ounce of hydrodynamic efficiency. See how the flow separates cleanly from that lengthened stern? That's a knot gained right there. Over in the shipyard, the deafening rattle of riveting hammers is fading, replaced by the bright, intense hiss of welding torches. This new technique isn't just faster. It's lighter. Every seam welded instead of riveted saves precious tons, a critical diet for a warship. The design puzzle facing the engineers is immense, a constant balancing act. The shocking capsizing of the torpedo boat Asterisk, Tamazuru Asterisk, and the catastrophic damage suffered by the Fourth Fleet in a typhoon were brutal wake-up calls. Stability was paramount. The solution was to add anti-torpedo bulges to the hulls. These made the ships far safer, more resistant to underwater damage, but they acted like a brake, adding immense drag and stealing vital speed. The ships were saved, but they were slowed. How do you get that speed back? You have to claw back every bit of performance you lost, and then some. You refine the hull lines, smoothing every surface. You trunk the funnels together, streamlining the superstructure to reduce wind resistance. But the real answer, the brutal, power-hungry answer, lies deep in the engine rooms. You have to stuff enormously more power into the same space. This is where the Kampon engineers perform their magic. They introduce new, advanced oil-fired boilers that operate at far higher pressures. They incorporate superheaters, which take the steam and heat it again, making it a dry, energetic gas that expands with much greater force. This high-energy steam slams into the blades of new geared turbines. The reduction gears are a masterstroke of mechanical engineering, allowing the turbines to spin at their optimal, mind-bogglingly high RPMs for peak efficiency, while the propellers turn at a slower, more powerful speed, biting into the water without churning it into useless foam. But here's the cruel arithmetic of naval architecture. Speed is not linear. It's exponential. The power required to push a ship through the water increases with the cube of its velocity. That means pushing a battleship from an already respectable 26 knots to just over 30 knots doesn't require a small boost in power. It demands a near doubling of the horsepower delivered to the shafts. It's a monumental undertaking. And all of this engineering is happening in the shadow of treaty politics. Take the asterisk high A asterisk. Under the naval treaties, she was demilitarized and converted into a training ship, her armor and some guns removed. But this supposed limitation was a secret opportunity. With the weight of her main turrets gone, engineers could experiment. They rebuilt her superstructure, tested new machinery layouts, and analyzed her stability, gathering priceless data that would inform the reconstruction of her sister ships. You can almost picture an exhausted engineer, rubbing his temples as he pores over a weight ledger, trying to find a way to save a few more tons. Or a yard foreman, stopwatch in hand, timing the performance of a new 4-propeller arrangement. The work is relentless, spread across Japan's great naval yards. The Kongō is rebuilt at Yokosuka, the asterisk Haruna asterisk at Kure, and the asterisk Kirishima asterisk at Sasebo. Each ship is stripped down and reborn. Frames are strengthened, new boilers and turbines are lowered into their hulls, and the new bulges are welded into place. Then come the trials. The moment of truth. With their new engines screaming, pushing out a staggering 136,000 shaft horsepower, the rebuilt battlecruisers surge through the sea. They're heavier, wider, and safer than ever before. Yet they slice through the waves, their bows throwing up magnificent plumes of spray. The measurements come in, and a wave of triumph washes over the designers. They've done it. Despite the added bulk, the class breaks 30 knots. This incredible speed isn't just for bragging rights. It's a strategic key. On the plotting tables at fleet headquarters, a new doctrine is taking shape, centered around fast aircraft carriers. And a 30-knot battleship, a fast battleship, is the only warship that can keep up. The only one that can provide the heavy anti-aircraft and surface protection the carriers will desperately need. The engine order telegraph in the bridge rings out, the handle slamming down to flank speed. Speed is no longer a theoretical number on a design document. It is the price of admission to the most powerful naval force on the planet, the Carrier Task Group. The year is 1941. The world is at war. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, one word defines survival: speed. The aircraft carriers of the WWII are the tip of the spear, but they are vulnerable. They need escorts, and not just any escorts. They need ships that can sustain 28, even 30 knots, hour after hour, across entire oceans. Enter the modernized Kongō-class battlecruisers. Stripped down, re-engined, and reborn as fast battleships, they are the greyhounds of the fleet, the only heavy ships capable of keeping pace. Imagine the scene in early 1942, the Indian Ocean raid. Sunlight glints off the azure water as Haruna and Kongō slice through the waves, their bows throwing up immense white plumes. They are part of the screen for Nagumo's carriers, a steel fist racing to catch the British Eastern Fleet. Admiral Somerville's Royal Navy forces are out there, hunting, but they're always a step behind. The Japanese fleet is a phantom, appearing off Ceylon, striking with brutal efficiency, and then vanishing back into the vastness of the ocean before the enemy can react. The secret? Unrelenting turbine-screaming speed. For the engineers who had poured their lives into these rebuilds, this was vindication. Their ships weren't just fast on paper. They were masters of the strategic sprint. But the war's character is about to change, and the strategic sprint will give way to the desperate nocturnal brawl. The name that will echo in naval history is Guadalcanal. Here, in the narrow, treacherous waters of the slot, speed takes on a new, terrifying purpose. It's no longer about chasing horizons. It's about a deadly game of hide-and-seek played under the cover of darkness. The ability to race down from Rabaul, arrive off Henderson Field after sunset, and disappear before sunrise is paramount. This is the Tokyo Express. Kirishima and Haie are its iron heart. Picture the bridge of one of these ships on a run south. The entire vessel thrums with a deep, bone-shaking vibration as the turbines spin at flank speed. The air is thick with the smell of hot oil and ozone from the electrical switchboards. On deck, lookouts squint into the tropical night, their eyes watering as the ship plows through flaming rain squalls, the sea illuminated by shellfire and burning aircraft. Their mission: bombard the American-held airfield into oblivion, to pound the U.S. Marines into submission before dawn breaks and the deadly dive. Bombers of the Cactus Air Force can rise to meet them. On the night of November 13, 1942, this deadly calculus fails. Haie, leading the bombardment force, stumbles into a hornet's nest of American cruisers and destroyers. In the chaotic point-blank melee that follows, speed is irrelevant. Haie is savaged, her steering crippled. She limps through the night, a wounded giant. Come morning, she's a sitting duck for wave after wave of American aircraft. Despite her crew's heroic efforts, the damage is too great. She is scuttled, the first Japanese battleship lost in the war. A report lands on a desk in the Kure naval arsenal. The engineers read it with a growing sense of dread. Their design had delivered the speed, but the armor they had sacrificed to achieve it had just cost the Navy a capital ship. The lesson goes unheeded. 2 nights later, it's Kirishima's turn. Under Admiral Kongō, she steams down the slot for another go at Henderson Field. Again, speed gets her into position. But this time something new is waiting in the dark. The American battleship USS Washington. Washington has something Kirishima doesn't: superior radar. While Kirishima's lookouts strain their eyes in the dark, Washington's radar operators are calmly plotting a perfect firing solution. The duel is brutal and shockingly one-sided. Washington's radar-directed 16-inch guns open up from the darkness. The first salvos are devastating. 9 massive shells slam into Kirishima in minutes, wrecking her turrets, flooding her engine rooms, and setting her ablaze. Her speed, the very quality that brought her to this fight, cannot save her. She is a brawler trapped in a sniper's crosshairs. She fights back valiantly, but it's hopeless. By dawn, Kirishima is a burning, sinking wreck, joining her sister ship at the bottom of Iron Bottom Sound. Speed gave the Kongō's choices. The choice to raid across the Indian Ocean, the choice to appear and disappear in the Solomon Islands night. But in the crucible of Guadalcanal, those choices ran headlong into the hard realities of modern naval warfare. Radar-directed fire and overwhelming air power. Back in Japan, a naval architect reviews the after-action reports. The pages are filled with technical data, damage assessments, and tragic accounts of loss. He picks up a pen. In the margin, beside the analysis of Kirishima's final battle, he circles a single word, a question that now seems both essential and utterly futile. Faster? The guard tower lights sweep across the wire, but they can't pierce the darkness of the heartland night. We press against the fence, feeling the cold steel bite into our palms. Then comes the sound. A low groan at first, building into a rhythmic, earth-shaking rumble. Another train. We don't need to see them clearly anymore. We know what's on those flat cars. The silhouettes of tanks, monstrous and hulking even under canvas. Long, crated shapes that can only be wings and fuselages. Night after night, the procession is endless. It's a river of steel flowing east and west, a river that seems to have no source and no end, By day, some of us are taken on work details. From a ridge overlooking the coast, we saw it. A shipyard. Not just a yard, but a city of cranes and scaffolding, berthing ships faster than we could count. One slides down the slipway, and before the splash has even settled, the keel of another is being laid. The sheer scale is an assault on the senses. It's a message, written in steel and fire across the horizon. We were told America was a nation of merchants, soft and decadent. We were told wrong. Later, they give us the numbers, printed in our own language in their camp newspapers. They call it re-education. We call it psychological warfare. They say that by 1944, America was producing more aircraft than the Reich, Japan, and Britain combined. Think of it. All our factories, all our workers, all our sweat and sacrifice, outmatched by this one country. They claim over 2,700 Liberty ships have been launched, a fleet conjured from nothing. At a place called Willow Run, a bomber was completed every hour. They even created their own rubber, mountains of it, making our U-boat blockades meaningless. Some of the men, the older ones, the ones with families they just want to see again, they fold the papers and slip them into their pockets. They read them in secret, their faces grim. Others, the true believers, the young fanatics, they spit. Propaganda. They hiss. Lies from a dying enemy. They snatch the papers, tear them to shreds. They call the readers defeatists, traitors, and we've seen what happens to suspected traitors. The real war isn't in the hedgerows of Normandy or the forests of the Ardennes anymore. For us, it's right here, inside the wire. It's a war of whispers and shadows. The cell leaders, appointed by ghosts in Berlin, still hold court. They enforce the old discipline with threats, with beatings in the dead of night. We all heard what happened at Camp Tonkawa. A man, gagged and beaten, his life extinguished because someone decided he was an informer. So we keep our heads down. We watch the trains. We say nothing. Fear is a currency, and it is traded freely in the barracks after dark. We stand at the fence again. The ground is beginning to freeze. A fellow from Hamburg, a man who saw his city burn, stands beside me. His knuckles are white as he grips the chain link. The night train screams past, its whistle a long, mournful cry. He watches it disappear into the black, a phantom caravan of destruction. He turns to me, his voice barely a whisper, but it carries the weight of a final, terrible truth. He says the words we have all been thinking, the heresy we have been too afraid to utter. We cannot outbuild this. He's not looking at the train anymore. He's looking at the darkness, at America itself. Winter settles in, deep and cold. News arrives smuggled in of a great offensive in the Ardennes. The Führer is final masterstroke, they say. For a week, a flicker of hope ignites in the barracks. The true believers strut and boast. Perhaps the tide is turning. Perhaps the propaganda was just that. But then the next night comes, and the night after that. The guard tower lights keep sweeping, and the trains do not stop. Their whistles are the only clock we have, marking the time. Not in hours, but in tanks and planes and ships, rumbling relentlessly toward our homeland. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe. Outside the barbed wire of a camp in Nebraska, church bells ring and car horns blare. But inside, there is silence. For the German prisoners of war, the end of the war isn't a simple moment of joy. It's a complicated, tangled release of emotion. There's relief, of course the fighting is over. But there's also a profound shame for the cause they served, and a deep gratitude for the safety they found so far from home, and underneath it all, a quiet fear of the unknown. What comes next? What came next wasn't a quick ticket home. The war was over, but the work wasn't. The Geneva Convention allowed a victorious nation to use POW labor for a period after the conflict to help with reconstruction. For many of these men, their journey didn't lead east back to Germany, but further into the Allied world. Thousands were sent on to Britain and France, put to work for months clearing rubble, rebuilding infrastructure, and harvesting crops in lands their own country had devastated. The process of repatriation was slow, stretching well into 1946, and for some, even 1947. They were sent home in waves. Returning to a Germany they barely recognized, a landscape of ruins, and a nation grappling with its own immense guilt. For a small minority, however, the journey took a different turn. Captivated by the America they had experienced, they began the long, arduous process of applying to return. Not as prisoners, but as immigrants, hoping to build a new life in the country that had held them captive. Think back to that first morning in the harbor, the shock of the New York City skyline. Now picture the last glimpse of America from the window of a departing train. It's late fall. The train rattles past grain elevators, swollen and golden with the harvest. It slides through small towns where the windows of the general store are full, not empty. Children, who a year ago might have stared with suspicion, now stand by the tracks and wave, seeing not an enemy, but just men on a train. The grand narratives of war often boil down to simple truths. Propaganda met a different reality. The sheer industrial might of America, the endless stream of planes, tanks, and supplies, was what ultimately decided the conflict on the Western Front. The prisoners saw it firsthand, not on a battlefield, but in the factories and fields where they worked. They understood perhaps better than anyone that Germany never stood a chance. And yet, decades later, when these men were asked what they remembered most about America, it wasn't the machinery or the military power. It was the small mercies. It was the taste of real coffee after years of ersatz substitutes. The impossible softness of white bread. It was the American farmer who, after a long day's work, shook their hand and looked them in the eye, not as a prisoner, but as a man. These small acts of humanity complicated their feelings, weaving a thread of admiration and respect through the fabric of their defeat. They saw a country that was not just powerful, but in its own way decent. Decades pass. One of these former prisoners, now a successful German businessman, is visiting the United States as a guest on a trade delegation. He's touring an American factory, the air thick with the smell of hot metal and oil. Suddenly, a whistle shrieks through the cavernous space, signaling the lunch break. And in that instant, he is no longer a guest. He's a young man in denim, standing in a field in Minnesota, the sun on his back. He remembers the foreman yelling, "Lunch," and the farm wife bringing out sandwiches and lemonade. He remembers the feeling not of being a prisoner, but of being part of something productive, something whole. And he knows with absolute certainty that this was the exact moment his war ended. Not on V-Day, not on a ship home, but in a quiet field, with a simple act of kindness. The great currents of history are powerful, but it's in these small personal moments that a life is truly redirected. A single sound, a line of freight cars against the horizon, or a simple slice of bread can rewrite everything you thought you knew. We've got more of these untold stories from the Second World War, stories that live in the details. If you want to hear them, stick around. You won't want to miss what's next.